The history of first overall draft pick for the Capitals over the years. Next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, I talk about the history of the Capitals. I talk about how they first joined the league and the 3 first overall draft picks in the Capitals history. Hint, hint, one of them stands much higher than the rest of them. I'll talk about that a little bit later. I will talk about the very first overall first-round draft pick, Greg Joly, and what he meant for the Capitals. A little bit later, I will talk about Rick Green and where he fits in and what kind of player he is. And then in the final segment, I will talk about Alex Ovechkin and what kind of first overall draft pick he has been. But just to get it going here, talking about the history of the Capitals a little bit, just to get going on the show here, in case some of you don't know, maybe there's some newer fans, just to give you a bit of the history. The Capitals joined the NHL as an expansion team for the 1974-1975 season. I'd be willing to wager that maybe quite a few people that are listening and or watching this show weren't even alive then. I was a couple years away from existing myself. Their inaugural season was dreadful, finishing with the worst record in the league with an 8-67-5 record. Over the years, the team struggled to be competitive, but there were bright spots in the form of impactful draft picks. Despite the challenges, the owner, Abe Pollin, stood by the team in contrast to the fate of the Kansas City Scouts, who moved to Denver after just 2 years. And then I think after that moved on to what is now the New Jersey Devils. So the Washington Capitals came into existence in the district in 1974. And like they said there, it was pretty dreadful to start off. And, it took a while for this team to get going for this team. And you take a look at how this team has grown by leaps and bounds, and how Alex Ovechkin, who I'll talk about a little bit later, kind of revolutionized hockey in the district and kind of brought the prominence and the respect to the district. The acquisition of the first overall pick in the NHL entry draft is a significant event for any hockey team, representing both a challenge and a thrilling experience. While no fan base wishes for their team to perform poorly, obtaining the first pick can mark the beginning of a new and exciting era. You take a look at Connor Bedard, for example. What did that mean? Well, you take a look at Connor McDavid, those kind of players. What did those players mean for their respective franchises? Talking about that here, the Edmonton Oilers selection of Connor McDavid as the first overall pick in 2015, even though it was said that he looked rather distraught that he was going to Edmonton. I think he probably feels pretty good about it now. Now, I say, if you look how poor the Edmonton Oilers started this season and how a new coach, Knobloch, kind of changed the fortunes of that team, and the Toronto Maple Leafs choice of Austin Matthews, some people say will make a big push for Alex Ovechkin and the overall goal lead. I guess we could argue about that, but that is what has been speculated. There have been pivotal moments for the respective teams. These picks have led to the emergence of notable talents in the sport, propelling their teams to new heights. Similar to that, the New Jersey Devils and the Buffalo Sabres have seen their first overall picks, Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Rasmus Dahlin, and Owen Power become key figures in their organization. And you take a look at the Buffalo Sabres, despite your thoughts on them, I'll talk about them briefly, that team will be one to be reckoned with in years. But to talk about the Capitals and where it all started for the Capitals, the first overall pick has been a compelling part of their history, with the team securing the first overall position 3 times. The first instance was in 1974 when defenseman Greg Joly was selected. However, Joly struggled to meet expectations and the team faced challenges in their inaugural season. And I did quite a bit of homework on him because I'm going to be honest with you, I was not too familiar with him, but taking a look at him, some people thought that he should have gone second overall, and that he had shown flashes of greatness, and ultimately they had their eyes set on someone else. And I'll talk about that a little bit later here. But talking about Greg Joly, Canadian former professional ice hockey player who was drafted first overall. Joly played a total of 365 NHL hockey games over the course of 9 seasons for Washington, the Red Wings. He scored the last goal at Detroit's Olympia Stadium, but his career in the NHL ended by the age of 28. Joly is considered to have been a draft bust. Definitely not something that you want to have, in notation or being known for that on the back of your hockey card, that even though I was selected first overall, I was considered a draft bust. The drafting process, the selection of Greg Joly by the Capitals in 1974 NHL amateur draft was a result of a series of events triggered by the signing of another player, Pat Price, by the WHA's Vancouver Blazers. This decision was met with criticism, as other highly regarded prospects such as Clark Gillis were available at the time. And that was the belief that the Capitals should have gone after another player. Ultimately, why did they land on Joly? I guess I don't know. Or why did they sign him and all of that kind of thing? The NHL expansion draft, and the longest draft in NHL history, in 1974, the NHL expansion draft did not yield significant talent for new franchises like the Capitals. The Capitals made 25 picks over 3 days in what was then the longest draft in NHL history, as they sought to add talent to their roster as it was a new team. You see what was done with Vegas. You see what was done with the Kraken here recently, and what will potentially be done here with Utah. That it is an exciting time, and no doubt was an exciting time for hockey in Washington, D.C. However, the draft was largely unsuccessful in providing the team with impactful players. Additionally, the NHL's decision to hold on to draft via conference call rather than in person was met with disapproval from some general managers. And then there was the pressures and the expectations on Greg Joly in particular, that he was the first prize pick for the Capitals, even though it will go down as history as not one of their finest hours. With high expectations placed on Joly's shoulders, he faced significant pressure as the face of the new Capitals franchise. However, the team's performance in their first season was dismal, with only 8 wins and significant goal differential. The pressure and expectations maybe contributed to challenges in Joly's performance. Being the first overall pick in the amateur one there for the Capitals had to be tough, especially since it was perceived that there were better options. I don't know what was going on in their mind, why they, happened to pick out those players, that particular player back then, and Rick Green and Alex Ovechkin. But, sometimes you just have to go with your gut. And back then, that is what they did. And it was an exciting time for the Capitals, a bumpy ride, to be sure. I'm sure that maybe there are maybe a couple listeners out there that were listeners, of the games back then, or watched them on television or attended them in person. Hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218, at Locked On Capitals, or on YouTube. I would sure love to hear your thoughts about the first year for the Capitals, or the first handful of years. What was it like to be a Capitals fan back then? We think it's hard now that, woe was me, the Capitals got eliminated in the first round. It was slim pickings, and it was really tough to be a Capitals fan in the earliest days. And I know that it wasn't just Ovechkin. There have been a lot of prolific hockey players going through the district, but how times have changed, and how, despite the fact that the Capitals did not get the season that they're looking for, they are a much better team today than they were so many years ago. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we will talk about Rick Green, another first overall draft pick for the Capitals. What did he mean for the team all those years ago? I'll discuss straight ahead. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. And let me tell you something, guys. Maybe you are watching the NBA playoffs. Maybe you're not that into it. It's your team's not playing. I know my team already got eliminated. So there's not a lot of vested interest. Or say you're watching the Nationals or this or that game and you're just not that into it. Get into the game by opening up the FanDuel app. Put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, the game is that much more exciting. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV Channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, talking about the history of first overall draft picks for the Capitals. There has been 3, and what they've meant to this team. I talked about in the first segment that Greg Joly was a bust. Some people said that at best he should have been a second overall pick, and what that probably meant for him as a guy, knowing that he didn't live up to expectations for a team that in its first year was struggling. Again, I talked about how we think the Capitals aren't playing well now. Consider how bad the team was back in the mid-'70s. Quite deplorable. Also, Rick Green, he was the next one. Richard Douglas. Rick Green, born on February 20th, 1956, was the Capitals' inaugural overall pick in 1976. NHL entry draft. Prior to his professional debut, he garnered acclaim by his stellar performance with the London Knights of the Ontario Hockey League, culminating in the receipt of the Max Kaminsky Trophy for the most outstanding defenseman in his final junior hockey year, a prestigious accolade bestowed by league general managers. And let's talk here, of course, about his career with the Capitals. I gave you a little bit of his history there. Green's steadfast presence as a defenseman spanned 6 seasons with the Caps, encompassing 377 games and yielding 31 goals and 127 assists, amounting to 158 points. Not that great, all things considered, in 377 games, but it was a different time. And notably, his performance during the 76-77 season saw him establish himself a team record, subsequently surpassed for the most shots on goal by a defenseman in a single game with 9. Despite his on-ice prowess, Green contended with persistent injuries his tenure with the Capitals. Talking next about him and what he meant, representation of Canada and trade to the Montreal Canadiens. Throughout his time with the Caps, Green represented Canada in the World Championships on 3 occasions and notably contributed to their bronze medal victory in 1982. Green's career took a significant turn as he was a part of a momentous trade that involved him and team captain Ryan Walter being exchanged for Montreal Canadiens for esteemed players, including defensemen Brian Engblom and Rod Langway, alongside forwards Doug Jarvis and Craig Laughlin. Maybe you've heard of one of those players. He's the color commentary guy, Craig Laughlin. Career with the Montreal Canadiens and post-playing career, Green's career continued with the Canadiens, culminating in a pinnacle in 1986 when he contributed to their victory over the Calgary Flames in the Stanley Cup Finals. Following his stint with the Canadiens, Green concluded his NHL career with the Detroit Red Wings and the New York Islanders before retiring in 1992, having amassed a total of 845 games, 43 goals, and 220 assists, culminating in 263 points. Post-retirement, he embarked on a coaching career, serving as an assistant coach for the Islanders and the Kings before subsequently returning to Montreal. So, taking a look at these players and what they've meant for the Capitals in the lean years. That's what I'm going to go ahead and say about Joly in particular, the lean years, the very beginning phases of the Capitals. Rick Green, oftentimes when we hear the name Green, if you're a younger Capitals fan, of course, you think of Mike Green and what he meant for the Capitals, a really great player for the Capitals, defenseman for so many years. But it is the history. And sometimes it's interesting to take a look back. And I think that, demographically speaking, there are quite a few younger listeners and viewers of the show. That is a bit of the history of some of the first overall picks for the Capitals. And in the early years for the Capitals, as there was quite a bit of struggles until they found some footing, and how, Alex Ovechkin and a lot of those type of players helped revolutionize hockey in the district and made it what it is today. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we will talk about that guy, Alex Ovechkin, how he changed hockey in the district and got more young people into hockey and made it a real hockey city. Let's talk about the Great Eight straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, talking some Capitals hockey in June. And I'm so happy you guys are along for the ride. In this episode, we are turning back the clock to the earliest days of the Capitals in Washington and their struggles, despite having some good draft picks, and Greg Joly, who was considered a bust, and Rick Green, two players that definitely did not live up to what Alex Ovechkin currently is and has been his entire career. By far, the best first overall pick for the Capitals. There is no question. In the 2004 NHL draft on June 26, 2004, the Caps forever changed their trajectory of the franchise by selecting a Russian forward, Alex Ovechkin, first overall in 2004. Held in Raleigh, North Carolina, Ovechkin previously played for Moscow Dynamo of the Russian Super League. The NHL draft that year was held in Raleigh, North Carolina. A large contingent of Capitals fans traveled down to RBC Center to witness and cheer on the selection. That had to be quite an event to be at, to select Alex Ovechkin and what that meant for the Capitals. According to then general manager George McPhee, the team fielded 15 inquiries and received 3 serious offers for the pick. Again, George McPhee will forever be in his debt for what he did with Alex Ovechkin. Ovechkin, heralded by scouts and GMs as the best prospect since Mario Lemieux, was too good of a player to pass up. And those are the things that you think about in hindsight and in retrospect and all those kind of things, is where would the Capitals be present day had they never selected Alex Ovechkin. Ovechkin's NHL debut and early career. While the 2004-2005 lockout delayed Ovechkin's NHL debut a year, the Russian machine dazzled when he finally put on a Cap sweater for the first time. Ovi scored twice in his first game and finished the season with 52 goals as a rookie, claiming the Calder Trophy. So right out of the gate, a dynamic player that I think is forever what has etched him in the hearts of Capitals fans forever. I don't think that he could ultimately do any wrong considering what he has meant for this team. So let's, take a look at the highlight reel of Alex Ovechkin. Ovechkin's career achievements after that season. Ovechkin, wearing a black Capitol Dome Caps jersey, announced the next first-round pick of the Capitals, Nick Backstrom, and what that meant for the Capitals. What kind of player would Ovi have been had it not been for Alex Ovechkin? Fourth overall. Over the years, Ovechkin's remarkable career had been decorated with numerous accolades, including 7 Rocket Richard titles, 3 Hart trophies, and a Conn Smythe trophy. In 2018, he led the Capitals to their first Stanley Cup victory, solidifying his place in the best player in team's history. Ovechkin handed off the Stanley Cup to Backstrom after finally winning a championship. It finally happened. Something that had eluded Capitals fans, something that had eluded Alex Ovechkin for quite some time, that this team that was good enough but not good enough to win a Stanley Cup did just that. The Washington Capitals selection of Ovechkin was the first overall pick in 2004 draft, marked a pivotal moment in the team's history. Ovechkin's exceptional talent and dedication have significantly impacted the Capitals' performance and contributed to their success. There is no doubt, culminating in the Stanley Cup, his remarkable achievements and statistics, including numerous awards, are what speaks to the lore and the legendary nature of who Alex Ovechkin is. Ovechkin's legacy beyond his on-ice accomplishments, Ovi's influence extends to inspiring countless individuals to embrace the sport of hockey. More people picked up ice hockey in DC after Alex Ovechkin started playing. That is quite an accomplishment. That feeling that I want to do what that guy is doing out on the ice, to just get that kind of enthusiasm into some people that maybe normally wouldn't have picked up playing hockey. As he continues to pursue the all-time goal record currently held by Gretzky, Ovechkin's legacy as the iconic figure in the NHL is undeniable. His imminent induction into the Hockey Hall of Fame and retirement of his jersey by the Capitals are testaments to his enduring impact on the organization and the league. I mean, again, there is no doubt after Alex Ovechkin hangs it up, at some point his jersey, his number 8, will be retired and hanging from the rafters. Ovechkin's impact on the franchise, reflecting on the Capitals' history of first overall selections, it is evident that Ovechkin's selection stands out as transformative moment that has shaped the franchise's trajectory and success and the face of the team forever. That is quite something. And, we can, talk about his slow start and, this and that, and how he likes to eat Subway sandwiches. And, he's had some down years. Let's never gloss over what he meant and does currently mean for this team, and will mean until he hangs up the skates. How, I talked about Greg Joly, I talked about Rick Green, and then all of a sudden you're going to have to move your camera up here a little bit, and you're all the way up here. Alex Ovechkin, revolutionized hockey in DC. And that is something that, despite however the rest of his career plays out, we will forever be in his debt for what he meant to this team. So kind of a fun trip for me anyway, down memory lane, taking a look at it, learning some things along the process. Again, I wasn't astute of Capitals hockey in the mid-'70s, as in some cases I wasn't even born yet. So it was fun to look back on that and just see how this team became what they are today. And I hope you guys appreciated this. All season long, it's game breakdowns, it's draft, and it's going to continue to be all that. But in these summer months, sometimes it's kind of fun to go off the beaten path a little bit and talk about the history. And if there's any topics that you guys would like me to cover, hit me up on Twitter or on YouTube. I'll do the best to cover those the best I possibly can. But there is exciting days ahead. We have the draft coming up. We have free agency coming up on July 1st. That this is kind of not the dog days. I'm going to say the dog days of the hockey season are, July, August, like that. But this is a slow time for Capitals fans. But there is still plenty of fun things to talk about for the Capitals. Player reviews, taking a look back on some Capitals history, what players we can add to this team potentially to make it a lot better. There is still a lot of excitement around Locked On Capitals. I love coming to you guys, even in the summer, as we get to talk about our favorite hockey team and the potential of what can be in the fall. And I want that to be clear here, that I know that they didn't get to what they wanted to last year, but even if they go into next season pretty much as is, this is still a really great hockey team with Ovechkin and Wilson and Carlson. And, you take a look at Charlie Lindgren and all the young talent with even Mirshnashenko and Connor McMichael, that things are still looking quite good. Even if this team goes in as is is still a team to be reckoned with. And this is our team. And let that kind of resound and wash over you that we are proud of this team and how far it's come. I know many of you weren't around in its earliest days, a lot like myself. And those people that were around back then, no doubt, have seen the evolution of this team. And, to talk to some of those guys and gals that watched the games back then, how much better this team is. Like Craig Laughlin, he was around back then and remembers the Capitals in their earliest days. It would be fun to hear him talk about some of those early days for the Capitals. Fun to kind of reminisce here sometimes. I hope you guys appreciate it. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel, available on the free Amazon Fire TV Channels app and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.